So, Steve, are you watching? So, welcome back to BD Rugby. Given that we're coming to the crunch end of the Premiership season, I wanted to have a look at some of the players that might be pushing towards that the World Cup spot. So, we're starting a new feature called Steve, Are You Watching? Which is trying to identify players that are performing well in the Premiership and who potentially deserve a call up to the squad. Now, these are not going to be the obvious players. Trying to pick out some sort of peripheral players that may not even make the starting 15, but who I'll put a case forward should be considered for the squad. Because to be honest, this World Cup going forwards, obviously England want to perform in that, but there's got to be a part of Steve Borthwick thinking ahead towards, future tournaments, not necessarily the World Cup because that's a long way off, but, future Six Nations, etc., and trying to develop a team. And, there's nothing better than bringing in a young player who's got a future, bring him into the World Cup setup because that sets him up quite well for future tours and future tournaments. So the first player, which is a player that has kind of been on my radar for a while, just because of the lack of English 12s in the Premiership, is the young lad Seb Atkinson at Gloucester. So I understand that Seb's a player who came over from Worcester, but has sort of become a fairly permanent place in the Gloucester team. What I like about Seb is he's not your classic, he's not your typical Lawrence or Tuolangis, he's not your crashing up 12, but he looks like he has the distribution skills. And nothing more emphasises that in the try that Rhys Ammett scored last weekend, and it actually all stemmed from his offload out the back. But in close contact, it's not like an offload out wide, which I think sometimes is slightly easy to perform, but in close contact when you're worried about losing the ball and taking contact, but being able to then actually, open your arms up and get rid of the ball is quite a skill. I think, if England want to develop and really become a progressive team, then perhaps this reliance on having a 12 that just crashes up is potentially a little bit limiting and a bit constraining. And moving forward, it may be someone that we need to sort of look at, see has he got the right mentality? Can he be developed, and can he have that all-round game? Because from what I can see is he can do the crashing up and he's the willingness to move because he seems to be more suited to a 12. And yet he's got the distribution of maybe we'll like a 10 that's playing 12. I think what we need to be conscious of is that both our options at the moment, so Tuolangi and Lawrence, have played most of their career at 13. Yes, Tuolangi's playing 12 now, but having played those positions myself, those roles are different. It's perhaps easier to transition to 12 than the other way round. But I suppose the other person is Dan Kelly that we've not really seen yet. But yeah, let's have a look at Seb Atkinson. Bring him in the squad. Let's have a look at him. Is he a player that we take on the tour to get that experience? The second man is Ted Hill. So again, I'm going to caveat this. Actually, I should have done that earlier on. But a lot of my viewing of the rugby is through the highlights. Don't have the option to watch all the games. And obviously, Bath had a very dominant display against Harlequins at the weekend. And it was a lot of it seemed to be fair. I guess the backs were playing well, and the highlight reel was very much around them. But you could see that they would generate a lot of front foot ball from their pack. So notable mentions go to their front row. So Ben Obana and the likes, and Will Stewart, for instance. Tom Dunn. But what really struck me was, in England, in the Six Nations, there was a bit of an issue with sometimes when defensively England were having to scramble back. I think the best teams do that. They're not always going to be able to. And there was a moment in the Harlequins game where Marcus Smith made a break, and it was Ted Hill who was the one who brought him to ground, having to work back really hard to bring him down. And I thought that, to me, shows a player who is prepared to work hard off the ball. This is a player who, came onto the scene quite young. When he was, to be fair, he was scoring tries. He was the highlights reel the other way around. But I get the feeling from reports and from the stuff I've seen that he's the sort of player that does a lot of that unseen work, works quite hard off the ball. You're probably classic six, perhaps in the mould of a Richard Hill. It'd be interesting to England to explore that. It's no criticism of the current back row and people like Lewis Ludlam I'm quite a fan of, who does a lot of that work. But it'd be interesting to see how England would perform with having a player that's not really worried about necessarily the carrying bit, but does a lot of the the donkey work, and and it's got a good work ethic and working hard off the ball. So again, another player who I think stepping up and who I think we'd like to see in the team, because I think he offers a slightly different variation to what we've got currently in the back row, which is a lot about carrying, Jacqueline, those time of key points, but maybe less in that sort of unseen role. And then the third person, which is probably a little bit more predictive, is Adam Radwan. I mean, you can't ignore that try. Yes, Newcastle went and got thumped by 60 points, but that first try is brilliant to see. But there was also another moment in that game where again he took on the winger. I think he did get put into touch, but it was the same kind of thing. It creates that fear in the opposition. I think I've talked about it on my videos before. England are obviously trying to look at this. They're trying to generate speed, and I think the selection of Henry Arundel in the final test was there saying we need to have some kind of raw speed and fear in that back line. I think if England have identified that they want to go that route, then I think we've got to bring Adam Radwan. I mean, I've listened to conversations from current wingers. I think Caden Murley was one of them, and they all think that Radwan is on a different level in terms of speed, and you can just see it in the game. He's fearless in taking players on. I think there are a lot of deficiencies in his game. I mean, in that same game, I think you could say he was at fault for one of the Northampton tries early on, where he didn't really defend well. But the England philosophy in this current setup is around optimizing the strengths and almost bringing other players in to support the problems and the deficiencies, and I really would like to see him come back in. I mean, there's a lot of hype around him, but I genuinely think in other nations he would be seeing more game time, because I think you'd be more brave to play him and get him involved. And I think again, think about it as a player on a bench, bringing him on. He's a game changer. If you need to score a try, he could score it from anywhere. And I don't think that we can kind of continue to ignore that. Yes, there are good wingers out there, and this is not for me to kind of, say that other wingers shouldn't be, but he definitely has a unique skill set that other players just can't compete with. So they're my three that I think, we're coming to the crunch end of the season. I think other players will step up. So I'm going to try and do this over the next couple of weeks to see if we can identify some of the players that we considered through. Obviously, there's other notable players that have been in the mix before. So Ben Spencer at Bath, and some other the current sort of England squad players who performed on the weekend. But these three are the ones that I think would be good to have a little look at, and perhaps we can might see them appearing in wider squads over the next few months. Thanks for your time. Continue to subscribe and like the videos. I will try and create some other content outside of just the England work, but I will do that going forward. So thanks for your time. Speak to you later. Bye-bye.